How's it going, Matt?
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you for letting me be here today. We are in one of the most manly places a guy can be, and that's in the gym. I told Matt the only other thing we could do would be have some guns hanging on the wall. Man, we're going to do things just a little bit different. Matt has a tremendous story, testimony, and I'm excited for him to share it with you. I think you're going to be blessed. I know I've already been blessed because I've heard it before, but I'm looking forward to it again. So we're going to get started here. Just let you kind of go with what you think the Lord wants you to say to the guys out there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Have a seat, and let me just kind of tell you a little bit about Matt. Matt is part of our Make It Happen missions team. He's been on a couple mission trips with us. He has a heart to serve, and that is reflected in the profession that he's in. Matt, you've been a firefighter for how many years?
17 altogether. I was almost 2 in Lufkin, and I've been in Beaumont for 15, so 17.
Wow, that's cool. And in Beaumont, you do what exactly?
I'm a district chief. I'm one of the district chiefs down there.
Cool deal, cool deal. Now, one of the things, obviously, we're in a gym here, so is this something like the gym? Is this part of your livelihood? Well, not so much livelihood, but the lifestyle you've had for how many years? Did you in high school or?
Yeah, so it's funny. Before we got started, me and Jake were talking. My brother, he's quite a bit older than me. He's 14 years older than me.
Wow.
And when I was 15, he just called me. So he'd been 20, he'd been like 20 at the time, 29. And just said, hey, man, we're going to go to the gym. And he'd pick me up at 4:30 in the morning down in Spring where we lived. And we'd go to the gym. And then he would take me back to the house. And I'd get on the bus to go to school. And then he would go to work. And so it started when I was 15. And then I played a little bit of sports and got more into the lifting side of it than I did the sports side.
Oh, okay.
And then eventually we met years later when I did some personal training for several years at the gym. I enjoyed that.
I remember that.
And then it kind of started off for a long time, it was just like a reprieve. And then it was kind of just a distressor. And then it was just a habit. And then along the way, I started integrating God into it. Because for a long time, it would just come in here, exercise, workout, kind of blow off steam. And I've always enjoyed it and loved it. And I was telling Jacob before we started that about a couple of years ago, I decided, I was like, I love doing this. I had to start bringing God into this and let him be a part of this too. And so that's what I did. So now that's all we do is we listen to worship music when we work out. And as you can see, a few of our signs, this is the House of Redemption.
Absolutely. That is great. I've been in a couple gyms and they don't listen to praise and worship. And Eminem has some interesting lyrics in some of his songs, but it has a good beat. Yeah. So, well, I tell you what, man, I was intrigued several months ago when we were on one of our mission trips. You began to share. And, what I believe is so important for guys to understand is that, you look at this guy, he's obviously in good shape, and he's committed to what he does. I think a lot of the time as men, we have this persona that we think that we have to project as men. And I know what Matt is about to share is going to give guys some direction, some hope, and some understanding. Matt, if you would, I know you've been a Christian. You're the story you told me. You've been a Christian, but you've just kind of been in neutral. What kicked you into gear? What kicked you into gear?
So it really started about 5 years ago. It really revolves around my dad, but we got to kind of back up a year or two before that because that's when it really kind of started. So we went to church when I was younger, and we were religious, but not overly religious. We were Lutheran. And so I was baptized when I was 10 or 11. Went to church for a little bit, kind of fell away, but would still around the holidays talk about God and talk about Jesus, things like that. But then really fell away for a long time and just kind of like most guys, especially young men, kind of go the way of the world for a while. Yeah.
Build that testimony.
Yeah.
Build that testimony. Yeah.
Yeah. And then me and my wife got married, and we were together for almost 7 years, and we wanted to have children, and we were having a really hard time. We couldn't have children. And so we ended up doing IVF, and we saved for a while to get to it. If anyone's had to ever do it, it is quite expensive. And so we saved up and we tried it and we did it and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And then just through like a happenstance, my wife's kind of estranged grandmother and grandfather-in-law kind of heard about it and more or less was like, hey, we want y'all to try it again and we'll pay for the medical side of it or the medicine side of it if you'll pay for that. So we're like, okay. And so we did. And it was not a high probability that it would work. And then we ended up having our son, Ethan, who's our oldest. He's now 8. I'm sorry, he's 8. Okay, so he was 8. Anyway, so we went through struggle. There were several years there of heartache, and especially as a husband, you can't help your wife. You don't know what she's going through. She's kind of carrying the burden, and as husbands, it's hard when they carry the burden, and we can't do anything.
What was your relationship at that time with the Lord? Was it something that was really stout? Were you kind of swaying back and forth? Or were you saying, Lord, what's the deal? What?
No. So just before that, there was a time where I kind of recommitted a little bit and we started going to a small church when we lived in Apple Springs, Dallas. And we went for about a year. And then I just fell away again. And then just a lot of different stuff. We started having a lot of marital issues. I was having a lot of just men problems, just demons, sin, all sorts of things. And then you add in the infertility with it and all that. So by that time, I had really fallen far away and would have been just strictly, like I tell people, it was like I was only Christian in name, not in action or deed or anything. Didn't really pray, didn't do anything. And so then we had our son. And a few years went by, and we decided, hey, we want to try another kid. I'm sorry. And so we're like, okay, let's do that. And we went to the doctor, and they were like, it's a low probability. And they actually tried to convince us to use someone else's eggs, not my wife's eggs, because they're like, it's probably not going to work. Well, we talked about it, and we decided we were going to take that risk on us. So our house in Apple Springs, we sold it. We made good money on it. We bought the land out here, and we were going to build a house. I had drawn blueprints to build a house myself because me and my dad, my cousins, we've all built houses before for each other. And so we're like, yeah, we'll build one more. We can build a pretty nice house and build it ourselves and save a lot of money. And we had picked everything out. Like it was done deal, gone to the bank, lined out, like we're going to start pouring the slab on this day and everything's lined out. And then right before that, kind of as we're doing that, my dad has a stroke. Well, he had congestive heart failure. He was a hard drinker for a very long time.
And so as you grew up, your dad was a drinker at that time as well?
Yeah,
okay. So you grew up with that? Okay.
Yeah, I did. And he had congestive heart failure, and he was kind of just doing okay for a long time, but the stroke really, really affected him. And he was completely paralyzed on the left side of his body. He couldn't lose his hand, he couldn't lose his foot, and he had slur. And we saw him in the hospital, and we were thinking he was going to have to move up with us, and we were going to have to start taking care of him because he lived in a house in Willis and lived in a 2-story, like it was like a lake house. We're like, man, you can't live there no more. And anyways, while he was waiting in the hospital, he gained 100% back his hand, his foot, no slur.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, just 100% went back like it was normal. But the problem was it damaged his heart further. So in this time where like he had the stroke, we thought we were going to have to change our lives. It kind of put stuff on pause. And then he recovered and we're like, okay, hey, we'll start back with our plans. Well, then he went in and he was getting worse. And they came in and they're like, look, he's dying. They're like, he's not going to live much longer. They're like, the only thing we can do is we're not going to do hospice, but we'll do what's called palliative care. Which palliative care, for anyone who doesn't know, is for someone who still is mobile and move around and can talk and kind of enjoy some things alive. So pretty much as they gave him a vest with medicines and they put a PICC line directly in his heart. And they're like, we're going to pump medicine into your heart and it's going to make you feel good, but you're not. And more or less, it's going to make your quality of life good until one day your heart can't take it. And they're like, look, some people live like that for a couple of months. Some live 6 months, a year. Some people live a year and a half. And so we had just moved out here. And so we kind of accepted, like, okay, that's not bad. My dad was like, well, hey, I'll come help you build the house. It'll be our last thing to do together. I was like, yeah, cool. And he only made it about a month. He was sorry. And he was down in Conroe. We went to go see him. And the doctors were like, there's just nothing we can do. I was like, okay. So we're all there, the family, and, prayed and this and that. And then one of the doctors she took pity on us. So, and was like, hey, we want to see if your dad would be a candidate for a transplant, heart and liver transplant, which they don't normally do for someone who's recovering, like who's an alcoholic. But she was like, I was so swayed by y'all that I'd be willing to do it, if he's willing to do it, because it'll be kind of like a first. And so we're like, sure. And they were like, look, you still got to go to the Methodist. He still has to live long enough to make it a Methodist. It's several months to like interview. They got to meet with everybody. They got to meet with the family. We had to write, I think, letters talking about our dad to try to get him in. And so we went through all that, and he was getting worse. And for anybody who's ever had to deal with like someone who's dying, whether it's organ failure or almost like dementia, and that's probably the worst part, is they're mentally not there anymore. Like when you talk to them,
Right.
they're not as sharp,
Right.
Sort of cloudy.
No.
I would talk to him and he would forget what we were talking about. And my dad was always razor sharp. He was a very smart man, very fast and funny. He was always very funny. And he just got to a point to where that's probably, I think for anybody who struggles with that with their family, is what hurts the most is that little piece of them just starts to go away. And so we go through and we do all that, and they accept them, and we move into a room. And so if anyone has ever had to do this, you go to Methodist downtown, you check into a room, it's your room, it's like an apartment, and you can decorate it and set it up, because they tell you this is where you're going to be until either you walk out or until you pass away. This is it.
Now let me ask this, man. At that point in time, had you had your second child yet? No. Was your walk with the Lord any better?
No, I want to say right around, I think it was probably right around this time, pretty close, is when my wife was like, hey, I want to start going to church. And I was like, okay. And so I don't remember exactly the time frame, but it was definitely during this time, because during this time, I was really starting to get pushed down in life, like humbled and pulled down, which was good. So yeah, so we had just started going a little bit. And anyways, and so then I decided we weren't going to build a house, because I didn't want to spend the last couple of months I had with my dad building a house.
Right.
So we just went and bought, a little double wide, which is nice. And because I'd rather spend the time with my dad, whatever time we had, to visit and laugh and just have some more memories together. And so I was spending most of my time there. We'd go back and forth, and I'd visit and sit with him. And he was steadily getting worse. Like I said, I would talk to him, and he would fall asleep every 30 seconds to a minute. He sometimes would remember I was there. Sometimes he wouldn't remember I was there. Sometimes he wouldn't remember the conversation. Sometimes he'd wake right back up and pick up the conversation. So it was kind of a thing, and a lot of driving back to Houston, a lot of tears driving to Houston. And two, because I was a dad at the time, and my son was young, and it was like, hey, here's my role model. As much as I love him, and as broken as he was at times, but he was so great at others and everything in between. And just watching him go away and be like, man, I'm not going to have that to ask about my son. Like, how do I father this, and what do you think about that? Because I depended on him a lot just for life when I was struggling with something, or if I had questions or whatever, I'd always go to my dad, and he would always cheer me up. And so during this time, there's a lot of heaviness in my heart, really been pushed down, and God's doing work. And then we get to a point, I'll share this real quick, where it wasn't looking good, and my dad wanted to see my son one last time, but he couldn't get out of bed anymore, because he had got so bad. They had machines keeping him going, keeping his heart. Like, he had a PICC line through his groin, and it was kind of like helping blood flow through his heart. And he was like, I want to be taken off the machines. And they were like, they did not recommend it. And because he wanted to be able to because my son couldn't come see him. So my dad had to get strong enough to where he could walk out and go see him. And he did it. He was able to do it. But then he deteriorated really fast. And they put him back on machines, but then he could never recover all the way. It's like every time it's like a reset, but the reset's lower. And then during this, and they're doing all the scans, and they find a brain aneurysm and in the front of his brain. And they were like, look, we don't think he'll survive the surgery because we can't fully sedate him because he's too weak, he'll pass away. And they're like, you know, what do you want to do? You know, we're willing to do it, more or less, as long as we sign stuff saying we won't sue you. So my dad was like, you know, he could barely talk at the time, so he signed, and we all had to sign, and all these lawyers explained to us that when he dies, like really adamant, like, and they're like, okay. And so he went and did it. He had brain surgery, aneurysm, and survived. And I stayed with him in the hospital those next couple of days. And then while I was in the hospital, it was the middle of the night. I think it was around like 11 or midnight. My dad was in the bed and just screaming and crying like I'd never heard before, man, in pain. And I didn't know what else to do. And it was the first time that I did. I got down on my knees, you know, 32 at the time, crying. And it was the first time I prayed, and it wasn't a prayer of, God, if you'll do this, I'll do that. There was no bargaining. There was no my will. There was none of that. It was God, I just need you to do something. It's time to take him home. And I lay back down and went to sleep for a little bit. And then about 2 hours later, I woke up. I woke up to my dad's voice, and he said, "Hey, son." And I kind of startled him, woke up, looked at him, and he was sitting up in bed, his blue eyes staring at me, crisp and clear, his voice. He was like, "Hey, son, can I have a glass of water?" And it was like the room was full of light. Because I hadn't heard him that clear in like over a year, like that precise. And it was like Jesus was standing in there, had his hand on my shoulder. It was like he was telling me, all these years you wanted to know who I was, if I'm real, how good I am.
Mm-hmm.
Look,
Wow.
and it was my father, blue eyes staring. I got him a glass of water. He thanked me. He went back to sleep. No more pain, because they couldn't give him pain medicine because he was too weak to pass away. So he had to just indulge with no pain meds, and he went to sleep. And I didn't go to sleep. And then it was probably like that Sunday. We were at church in Timber Creek, and our pastor was talking about giving a year of your life to God and what difference would it make. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, you know, I've done so many things in my life. I think we all have, whether it's, you know, do an Atkins diet or do paleo or do all these things for like health and physical and mental health. I was like, but what about spiritual health? I said, what if I did that? But what if I was as open to it and invest as much energy and time as I did all those other things? And I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do is for 1 year, I'm going to dedicate. I was like, I just decided 15 minutes of my day. When I first get up, I set an alarm on my phone. I downloaded the YouVersion Bible app, and I was like, I'm going to just do the verse of the day, hear what the message is, and then read it, and then pray over it. And then I'm going to at least listen to like 2 worship songs. It took about 15 minutes. And so I'm just going to start doing that. But I'm going to be open to it, that like every verse that I read, I'm gonna act like that it was tailor-made, handpicked, that God wanted me to hear today.
Absolutely.
Just truly be open to it.
Absolutely.
And I was like, and we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll get done. Maybe I'll draw closer. Maybe I'll get done. Maybe I won't. But I'm going to try the process. I'm